Well, we have a ton of stories to go over today because Nintendo's been talking a lot over the last 24 hours about the state of their company, their plans, their future, the Zelda movie, so much more. There's like so much news today that honestly, I've got like, I don't know, 20 plus tabs open here to go over a bunch of news stories with you guys today. And I got to say first off that Nintendo's doing pretty good. If you work at Nintendo, you should feel very confident about how the business is doing. So, this is going to not necessarily be a sales update. We did a sales video yesterday. We went over all of the numbers, but this is going to go over all of the details surrounding the Nintendo Switch 2, its present, its future, and the state of Nintendo. So, man, we got a lot to get into. Before we do, I just want to remind you, we are giving away 5 copies of Kirby Air Riders through the link down in the pinned comment or the description. If you're wondering about Age of Imprisonment, I am drawing winners today. As soon as I get responses through emails, and get usernames, I will make a public post. I'm still even waiting for responses for our last giveaway before that. So hopefully I can announce everything today, but I don't control it. It's up to people responding and obviously accepting the win. So we'll get that all sorted, get an announcement post. But hey, you can enter for Kirby Air Riders in the meantime. All right, let's go ahead and get to our first story. And surprisingly, I'm actually going to be referencing a fellow YouTuber, Mike Odyssey, just because he discovered where this was all originating from. There's rumors flying around that filming had just started yesterday for the Legend of Zelda movie. And it's like, okay, those are rumors, do we have anything more tangible? Well, we do, and Mike Odyssey found it. So, the Zelda movie has officially been casted, like fully casted, and we'll hear an announcement soon. Okay, I want to be clear here. That is an assumption on his part that we're going to hear an announcement soon. I don't think we're hearing an announcement on any more cast anytime this year. But again, his opinion, we'll see what happens. But he says we could even see a teaser trailer on or before the 40th. Okay, that's obviously just his opinions. Let's get to the actual stuff here. So from the Film and Television Industry Alliance. All right. Shoot date November 4th, 2025 to April 7th, 2026. So that is how long they're looking to shoot out in Wellington, New Zealand. And it says a live action adaptation of the video game franchise The Legend of Zelda follows Link, a young warrior destined to protect the magical kingdom of Hyrule from the forces of darkness. This land is under great threat from Ganon, a ruthless warlord who seeks the Triforce, an ancient relic said to grant limitless power. So we know it's going to be a Triforce related story here. To stop him, Link must embark on a perilous journey battling monstrous creatures, exploring treacherous dungeons, and solving intricate puzzles to uncover sacred artifacts that can aid him in his quest. Okay, so basically the basic plot to most Zelda games. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot, but hey, it is filming. It is pretty neat to know that it's filming. Again, the movie comes out in 2027, so that's something to look forward to. We also have another piece of news that isn't related to what Nintendo has said the last 24 hours, more so just general video games stuff, and that is tomorrow, Pokemon Legends ZA Mega Dimension DLC news is happening. So this happened over on Twitter. It says, stay tuned for an update on Pokemon Legends ZA Mega Dimensions tomorrow at 2 p.m. GMT time. So there you go. It's out there. Look, we'll probably cover the news tomorrow. I don't plan to live stream it, but that's because I'll probably be live streaming at the time it happens. Age of Imprisonment for launch. So yeah, we're just going to leave it at that. If you're excited for that, we'll have the news for you in a video. Next up, we have a breakdown of a ton of stuff coming from a report from Nintendo, and I'm going to reference individual news articles for this instead of going to the Nintendo breakdown, because the Nintendo breakdown, we would be reading through a lot of fine print, but just to kind of show you, this is like Nintendo's consolidated financials, and this is the explanatory material. We've gone over some stuff yesterday. This is a new thing, however, but we're going to go over each individual part of this in little segments. And that first begins with this story right here. Nintendo states its intention to acquire more development teams. That's right. Nintendo is looking to purchase or invest, obviously, in more development teams. So it's in this image here that's in there, and it says cash utilization for strengthening the business foundation. And it says area strengthening game development, so establishing and expanding game development capabilities within Nintendo, which means an expansion of development facilities through the construction of the new headquarters, and acquisition of developers as subsidiaries. So right here, they are looking to acquire more video game studios. I don't know who they're looking at. I have one One possible example out here, maybe Grezzo. Grezzo feels like a natural acquisition for Nintendo. They make a ton of Nintendo games. They've proven they can make their own unique games. We've seen Triforce Heroes. We've seen, obviously, Echoes of Wisdom. So I do think that, they are the perfect candidate for a potential purchase. Some people have suggested possibly Platinum Games. I know a lot of talent has left Platinum Games, but that doesn't mean that there's still not some value there. So that could be a possibility to float out there. So there's a few out there. Again, Nintendo does not make tons of these acquisitions, and they don't obviously go to the length that Microsoft and Sony has gone to with some of theirs. But hey, we do see some results. Shiver Entertainment was purchased, and they were used recently to port a high-end AAA third-party game to Switch 2, and it worked out quite well. Even buying more of those port studios could do really well for Nintendo, as well as they're offering them to third parties to help them get their games running on Switch 2. Now, another story I want to get to that pertains to all this financial stuff deals with third-party software. So Nintendo made an announcement regarding third-party software that I don't know if anyone's bothered to fact check, because I think you can fact check this, but Switch 2 has the largest third-party software lineup ever for new hardware. This was a statement made by Furukawa saying, not only have we already seen multiple hit first-party titles, but we've also had many software publishers on board from the very beginning, resulting in the most extensive launch year lineup of any of our dedicated video game platforms. And I find it interesting. They put up this graphic here with Cyberpunk, Deltarune, Fantasy Life, Hogwarts Legacy, which was actually on Switch 1 as well. I forget what the name of this one. This game here is in the top right. But then you see Madden, Story of Seasons, Exit 8, Silksong, 2K26, FC 26, Hades 2, another game I don't recognize, Final Fantasy 7, Dragon Quest 7 Reimagined. Then you see Yakuza, Resident Evil, etc., Monster Hunter Stories, Elden Ring, Duskbloods, etc. So you are seeing a wide range of titles, but it's interesting because they said, in the first year, and that would mean from June to June, or June to at least the end of May of the following year. So I find it interesting because you would have to really go back to all of Nintendo's system launches and kind of look at the available third-party software to really determine if this statement is true. There's probably some truth to this for compared to the Nintendo Switch. Well, Nintendo Switch actually had some fairly good third-party support during its first calendar year. It was not at this level. We were not getting all of these games. Remember when 2K26 and Doom was like the big third-party stuff, the impossible ports? Well, we've gotten a lot more than that this time around already. So I will say that this could be a true statement. What I will say is, whether it's 1000% true or not, I don't think there's an intentional lie here. I do believe that in the end, this was maybe a bit hyperbolic, but also Switch 2 does have a lot of variety with third-party games. And I think that is worth noting when talking about the future of Switch 2, is that we're already seeing a wide variety, especially from the AAA space, of third-party content. I think that bodes well for the future, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, here's a story. Nintendo teases movies to come. Yeah, it's pretty interesting here. They don't say a whole lot, just, we are continuing to prepare the ongoing release of movies in the future. And so obviously we see the Super Mario movie, the first one, then the Mario Galaxy movie, the Zelda movie in 2027, question. Obviously they have a couple movies planned. There's been rumors around a cinematic universe and all this stuff. This, I don't think, confirms or denies that, but this does confirm Nintendo is, looking ahead. They're not just considering the Mario Galaxy movie and the Legend of Zelda movie. They are literally looking ahead to multiple movie franchises in the future. So, look, if you're enjoying Nintendo's one movie offering so far, because we haven't seen the second Mario movie, we haven't seen the live action Zelda yet, just know Nintendo is fully committed to this movie stuff they're going on. So I guess, hey, that's good news for those of us that like to go to movies. Next up, they go over this thing about player transferring to Switch 2, and it's actually quite interesting because it addresses a couple narratives that have been going on with Switch 2 sales. And one of those narratives is the only people buying Switch 2 are the hardcore Nintendo fans. There is no spread of people who bought Switch throughout its lifetime deciding to hop in right away. That might be more casual because, again, only the hardcore are interested in Switch 2 right now, which usually is true on day one. And I do think that launch weekend was mostly your hardcore fans. But I think since then, the sales have actually already started trickling out to the general audience. So we'll talk about that here. But also, Nintendo was able to capture people who didn't buy Switch, which that's even more fascinating to me. So we got the player transition chart here, and it says 84% of Switch 2 players have transitioned from Nintendo Switch. Not only early adopters, but consumers who started playing Nintendo Switch at various points of its life cycle have also transitioned to the Switch 2. So you can see the breakdown here that while 2017 has the largest segment of the buyers, right? Again, those are your day oneers that are, those same people that bought Wii U and stuff like that. You're seeing 2018, 2019, 2020 also really strong represented there. And even people from 2021, 2022, 3, 4, and 5 also buying, obviously 3, 4, and 5 being the smaller segment, which makes a lot of sense considering that those people bought Switch kind of late in its life. So they'll probably be the ones that upgrade a little later, but there are still some that did that. There's still some that bought Switch this year that went ahead and bought Switch 2. I think that's fascinating. And then you're seeing this large chunk, not quite as big as 2017, maybe more in line with 2018, but 16% are brand new players that did not own a Switch 1. That to me is absolutely fascinating. Here's what Furukawa said. I would now like to share some insights about the Switch 2 player base on our internal sources. Currently, 84% of them transitioned from Nintendo Switch. This high percentage shows that many consumers who enjoyed the Switch are smoothly transitioning to Switch 2, allowing us to maintain our relations with them across platform generations. Furthermore, if we look at what these transitioning customers first started playing Switch, we see no concentration in any specific period, like a vast majority happening, in one segment. It's kind of spread out. Consumers who purchased the Switch between launch in 2017 and, today, the launch of Switch 2, have been uniformly migrating to Switch 2. So I think this is just a very fascinating chart to look at because, again, the narrative has been it's just the super hardcore buying this platform. And yet the reality is it's actually a wide spray of people that bought Switch throughout its lifetime. Hardcore fans are your ones that are there like day one. So yeah, there was obviously a huge chunk of us that went day one that were the hardcore Nintendo fans. But honestly, with that wide spray and the easy availability at retail for any consumer to walk in and buy, I kind of feel like we're starting to see sales trickle out here. And I think this chart helps prove that. Of course, there's no definitive way to prove how hardcore a fan is, right? Like how hardcore a buyer of Switch 2 is. There is this natural assumption that nobody wants to Switch 2 if you're not a hardcore Nintendo fan. And I think that's just a gross overstatement because, you might be against what Nintendo's doing and all this stuff. General consumers aren't paying attention to that stuff and usually don't care. So it's really hard to measure that audience. That said, we learned something very interesting here about Mario Kart. Now, the headline's about Mario Kart, but I want to be very clear. The interesting part is actually about Pokemon. Pokemon is brought up, and Mario Kart / Mario played a huge role in Pokemon being brought up. And we learned something about one of the reasons that Pokemon, I don't want to say the mainline because we have mainline games now that are just single titled, but that a lot of the mainline titles have two releases, like a dual release. It turns out that Mario has something to do with it. So as we go in here, this comes from Shigeru Miyamoto. And this was during the investor Q&A. And he said, at Nintendo, we always approach our work with the belief that there are no limits. For example, when we attempted to film the Super Mario Bros. Movie, it was compared to the box office receipts of other films. However, even if we were to reach number one on that list, I believe there is always something even better. My recent theme is that the entertainment world has no limit. In that sense, there is still a vast market around the world that can be expanded through the Switch. If some of Nintendo's IP or systems are widely accepted by consumers as something never before seen, there is a possibility that we could achieve numbers that go beyond the boundaries of entertainment. I think the exciting thing about Nintendo is that we are open to taking on any challenge. However, even if that situation were to occur, Mario Kart would likely to continue to sell even more in that arena, so it may never be surpassed. A long time ago, before creating the first Pokemon software, Tajiri, the director of Pokemon, joked with me that if you want to surpass Nintendo's Mario, you'll have to sell 2 copies of the software to each customer. That was one of the reasons Pokemon Red and Green were created. I believe that it is precisely because there are people like this who are determined to surpass them somehow that new things are born. Very interesting. Obviously not the only reason that Pokemon Red and Green and thus the dual release strategy of Pokemon began, but clearly one of them. It might have been a joke, but also a little bit of seriousness. Hey, like, You know, the makers of Pokemon wanted to find a way to compete with Mario, and they just didn't think they could do that without some sort of dual release strategy. Kind of fascinating. You know, there's not a lot of games out there that do this dual release strategy. We've seen it before. Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, right? That was another attempt from a Nintendo aspect. And there's been other companies that have tried a dual release strategy before. So yeah, you know, kind of interesting. Obviously, it's probably not the driving reason, but it's one of them that was taken into consideration. And I think that is pretty good. Now, one headline that started getting shared yesterday is that Nintendo is done making Switch 1 games. And it was based on a quote about how Nintendo is focusing on Switch 2 games. Well, we have some clarification today. And no, they're not done making Switch 1 games. But I wouldn't expect to see very many of them moving forward. This year, the number of Switch 1 games we had is going to significantly drop next year and probably drop the year after. But they still are working on some because Nintendo says it'll ship games for Switch 1 still. So here are the quotes, and this comes from the Q&A with Furukawa. While our development resources will shift primarily to Switch 2, we will continue to develop Switch software and plan to release new titles in the future. Our dedicated video game business is based first on popularizing the hardware and then continually releasing new titles. During the Switch generation, we achieved this balance well, with many titles becoming staples that continued to sell for long periods of time, maintaining the momentum of the platform as a whole. For the Switch 2, we believe it is extremely important not only to continually release new titles, but also to ensure that these titles continue to sell throughout the platform's life cycle. Furthermore, with software development costs increasing and development times lengthening, it is becoming more difficult than ever to consistently release new titles. Since the Switch 2 can also play Switch software, we would like to recommend Switch software to consumers who are picking up a game console for the first time. Taking this into consideration, we believe that maintaining the momentum of the Switch 2 business will depend on balancing the release of new titles with ensuring that staple titles continue to be enjoyed for a long time. This could actually explain why there's been an update to Animal Crossing New Horizons coming. Because again, this is one of those things where you got to ensure that people that are buying a Switch 2, that 16% that could be growing at this point, that 16% has a reason to pick up the original Switch 1 software and doesn't feel like they've been abandoned. Now, the Nintendo director and senior managing executive officer Shinya Takahashi also had a few words about this. He said, our development team is always striving to deliver new titles at a good pace. With that in mind, we also want to continue to value things like Animal Crossing New Horizons. There's the mention update we announced the other day. We're constantly considering the balance between developing all new titles for Switch 2 and new titles in the series and updating Switch software. We're also working to deepen our collaboration with new collaborators in addition to our existing partners, and to expand our development capabilities in both quality and quantity. Furthermore, with regard to R&D investment, we intend to allocate sufficient funds if necessary. So again, Nintendo is willing to invest heavily into game development. That could include purchasing potentially new developers, but expanding the development team and all of that. But they do recognize it's just going to take longer to make games. And because of that, they got to find a way to supplement it. One thing is to just expand, obviously get more development teams, make some acquisitions. That's one way Nintendo plans to tackle it. The other one is, hey, we have a lot of this evergreen Switch content that it doesn't make sense to just throw out to the pasture and pretend doesn't exist. So we got to balance finding ways to update that stuff while making new games. Like obviously a new Animal Crossing's in the works, but until it comes out, why not give current Animal Crossing fans something to do to continue to want to play on Switch 2? Now, you might not agree with the $5 update. I think that's a different discussion, but it's obviously a balancing act Nintendo's trying to sort out. And I think so far, they've done a pretty good job. I think people will be a bit more excited when some of your bigger titles get announced. Now, look, I'm excited by the lineup. Age of Imprisonment tomorrow is my most hyped game of the year. But I have to say that, for general audiences, they're looking for the big staple IP. And we haven't really gotten that yet besides Mario Kart. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Also, if you're worried that Nintendo might stop selling Nintendo Switch anytime soon, well, worry not. Nintendo will continue to sell Switch as long as demand is there. But obviously their focus has shifted. This comes from the financials, and it says, while our business focus will shift to Switch 2, Nintendo Switch has maintained a steady sales pace even after the June launch. And it has. While taking consumer demand and the business environment into consideration, we will continue sales of Switch hardware. We will shift our primary development focus to Switch 2, and that's where people got like oh my God, they're not making games for Switch 1 anymore. No, they're still going to. They're just going to be far and few in between. Tamagotchi Life is an example. might be the only game next year. I have no idea. We'll have to wait and see. But Nintendo is obviously still continuing to show some support to Switch 1. Switch 1, obviously, they're planning for it to sell about 4 million units this fiscal year. So that's pretty interesting. If they could do that again and then maybe trickle a little more after that, Nintendo could then see, potentially becoming the best selling platform of all time. I'm not so sure Nintendo cares about that because there's things they could be doing that would definitely help, like not raising the price of the platform. I think that's going to really hurt the sales. And I think they know that. All right. Next up, we want to get to just, the key stats from Nintendo that they care about, that they try to, tell investors everything's going great. So one, they have 128 million annual playing users. So that means people that have Nintendo accounts on Switch or Switch 2, have logged in and used the system at least one time in the last year. It's 128 million different people. Nintendo account, there's 400 million. Got to remember, use Nintendo accounts on the mobile apps as well. That's why you're going to see that number be so much larger than the actual base. You also got to remember the annual playing users, that could include mobile. So it's a lot to consider in those numbers. And then you have the Nintendo Switch Online members. Those are 34 million. That number, I believe, has gone up slightly, but not a whole lot. And this is as of September 30th. So, yeah, I mean, pretty healthy overall considering you're launching a new platform. Then Nintendo's pretty happy with those numbers. They probably want to see the Switch Online, start to get closer to 40 or 50 million. That's what I'm guessing. Usually want to keep seeing growth there. Beyond all of that, one thing Nintendo focused on, surprisingly, I didn't realize they were going to talk about this. They talked about their strategy and how they're trying to build trust with their consumers. Maybe they're bringing this up just because there's a concern among investors that like Nintendo's eroding the trust with their consumers with some of the decisions they've made. And maybe they just wanted to like let them know, hey, we hear your concerns, but we actually do care about maintaining that trust, which, look, guys, maintaining trust with your consumer base is how you get their money, right? It's a money-driven decision, but it's also, hey, consumer trust equals money. It kind of works in tandem. So they said they look to build trust with customers through franchises they carefully craft and nurture. Here are the words from Furukawa. We have many characters that our worldwide consumers have helped nurture over a long period of time. These characters originate from our games and, being linked to our unique brand of entertainment, possess a value that cannot be found elsewhere. We strive to build a relationship of trust with our consumers by carefully crafting and delivering high-quality games, products, and services featuring these characters. So what they're trying to say here is, hey, look, one thing we want you to feel good about is that if you buy Donkey Kong Bonanza, it's going to be a good game, right? You're not going to buy it and it's a bad game. Of course, Nintendo can only talk about the games that they're making. I know there's a lot of controversy around Pokemon, but I would say in general, Nintendo's done a pretty good job with like their IP. When you buy Kirby Air Riders, you could probably trust it's going to be a pretty good Kirby Air Riders game, right? That's how Nintendo's approaching the IP, and I feel like they've done a good job maintaining game quality over time. Some of you might disagree. All right. We believe that accumulating this trust is what changes people from simply knowing our characters into becoming fans of our IP. This approach is common not only to our dedicated video game platform business, but also to our initiatives outside of gaming, such as the movies and character merchandise. We believe that our relationship with consumers should not be short-term. One of Nintendo's strengths is that our entertainment reaches a wide range of people across generations. That might actually be one of the reasons that they don't do the nickel and diming of microtransactions so much in their games, because I think they probably believe that is damaging to the long-term prospects. So you might make a lot of money in the short term, but then you fast forward 5 years and those people aren't spending money anymore because they're frustrated. Yeah, I think that that could play a role there. I think we're seeing this with some other companies that are struggling right now. Anyways, we aim to maintain a connection to our consumers throughout the various stages of their lives so that their experience with Nintendo Entertainment can resonate with them and become cherished memories. Nostalgia, of course. For example, our ideal cycle is where a person's first Nintendo game becomes a fond childhood memory. Later, as a parent, they play Nintendo games with their own children, and eventually as grandparents, they might spend time with their grandchildren playing with My Mario building blocks or reading a picture book, or playing games with their grandchildren. This connection with consumers that spans generations is what we strive for. Building these relationships over many decades is another core principle that guides all of our endeavors, which of course it is. I mean, look, all of this leads to you making money throughout a person's entire lifespan. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't want to do that. Next up here, we have something that's a little different. This actually comes from Matt Piscatella, who did a thing with Spawnwave, and I just want to watch this here. We're actually gonna read this. It's just something about the shift. Nintendo's last remaining of the physical forward publishers. Again, Matt Piscatella. At least in the U.S., other parts of the world may be different. Nintendo still maintains physical focus and a retailer focus. There's a dedicated buyer that loves physical. Like you said, that mix is continuing to shift, and with most recent Switch models, Switch 2, we are seeing that shift happening a little bit faster. So, while he's not saying that it's happening as fast as PlayStation and Xbox, he is saying, hey, it is faster than Switch 1 on the Nintendo Switch 2. That's what they're noticing Circana is in the US. So, take that for what you will. We're actually going to do a whole discussion on this tonight, so I don't want to say much more than that. And we have one more story to get to. This kind of broke a little bit earlier today. In fact, let me open up my app here, because Nintendo launched a new app. Now, on one hand, cool, Nintendo launched a new app. On the other hand, Nintendo has too many apps. Like, they have 4 apps to do what like PlayStation and Xbox kind of do in one app. So that's what it was that people, and that's like an eShop app. So this has been available in Japan for a while, and they have now launched this app in United States. Obviously, this is on iPhone. They have it on Android as well. One of the coolest things about this app, besides the fact that you can make purchases and have it installed to your Switch or Switch 2, is when you go over to your profile and you scroll down, there's this play activity, and you get this little play activity chart that comes up, and you can sit there and look at your play activity of everything on the go. You don't need to be at your Switch, and you're not limited to the Switch's list. And you can see here the announcement here over on Nintendo Everything, and some of the features. So you can shop on My Nintendo Store. You can use the app to browse Switch 2 and Switch systems and accessories, physical games, and other Nintendo products. So you can literally order like a Switch 2 through the app if you want, or the Virtual Boy. You can order that accessory through the app, etc. You stay up to date with the latest news on Nintendo games and events. That's what I mean. So they have a news application on your Switch. Fine, that's not your phone, right? They also have news application on here where you can get news. They also have, don't forget, the Nintendo Today, where you also get news. I'm really confused. Like, it feels extremely disjointed, if I'm honest. That's maybe as glad as I am to have this app, especially with the play activity. It's very confusing what Nintendo's strategy is here with all these applications that other companies have put into one. Hopefully Nintendo finds a way to consolidate, because then you got Nintendo Music on top. You got the Nintendo Parental app. Man, like, there's got to be a better way, Nintendo, than making separate applications for everything. So maybe they consolidate someday. Anyways, you can stay up to date on the latest news, receive notifications about sales. That's pretty neat. Review your play activity. That's one of the big ones. You can go like all the way back to 3DS and Wii U. Got to connect your Nintendo Network ID, of course. And you can check in on events. You can use the app to check in at local stores and events and earn some rewards, some points or whatever, pins, whatever they're handing out. Weird. Just a weird way. I don't know. Nintendo's got to find a way to consolidate this stuff. But for now, I have all of the apps. They're all logged into my account. It's going to be weird when, a big news piece drops, like a Nintendo Direct announcement, and it appears on the Shop app, but then also appears on Nintendo Today. And I get double, triple notifications for it. All right, Nintendo. It's fine. I'm not saying the apps don't function. They do function and work well. It's just, hopefully you can figure it out, because I think, a lot of us are used to having hundreds of apps on our phone, but I feel like, people would like to consolidate things when they can. It'd be nice to have some consolidation. Anyways, that's my only real critique. I'm actually glad the app exists in general. Now we can purchase from the shop. We can buy things. We can look at our play activity. I like this. This is actually a good application. Why can't we just pack it all into one app? Anyways, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I am Nathaniel Rovajets from Nintendo Prime. Of course, we have our podcast tonight, the Nin10 Byte podcast. We got a banger episode tonight. HMK coming on, N64 Josh. We'll be talking about all of this stuff that we've been talking about all week long. There's so much going on. Maybe even a little bit of NDS we'll talk about as well. If you don't know what that is, stay tuned, because I guarantee, based on the conversations we're having behind the scenes, that it's going to come up. Thunderstash made a very bold statement during our last podcast, and I feel like that statement is going to be coming up. Whether I agree with that statement or not, It doesn't matter. He stands by it. So we're going to have quite the conversation tonight. Catch you guys later.